Hi, and welcome to this TorquePoint knowledge series on the New Zealand political spectrum in 2020. I'm Simon Ewing-Jarvie.
And I'm Heather Roy.
So, Heather, tell me about the parties in Parliament at the moment.
Well, following the 2017 election, we were just left with 5 parties in Parliament, a decrease on what we had previously. The Labour Party obviously became the major party in government, and they were in a formal coalition with New Zealand First. The Greens had a more informal arrangement with the government, giving them confidence and supply. On the opposite side of the House, there was...
Right, so that's where National landed, and as the major opposition party, and also one ACT MP. But there are some other parties featuring in the political landscape that are not in Parliament but are polling, Heather.
That's right. So there's the Maori Party, who previously did have quite a significant presence in government. They are actively contesting the Maori seats this election. They've got 2 new leaders and are polling at times not too badly, so it's possible they may get back.
Right, and 2 other smaller parties?
Yes, there's TOP, as it's most commonly known, the Opportunities Party. They still seem to have a bit of a presence out there, and the New Conservative Party, which is the hangover party, if you like, from the old Colin Craig Party, with quite a religious focus.
Right, well, let's just look at the parties that are currently in Parliament. So the political spectrum is usually described by commentators as being left, right and centre, and subtle variations of that. But is that really useful? What does that actually mean, Heather?
Well, it's not useful at all, I don't think, but it's a simple model that the media likes using. Politicians are either left or they're right, and sometimes they're described as centrist. The terms actually go back to the French Revolution, where those on the left-hand side of the president stood for making changes, and those on the right were believed more in maintaining the status quo and the process. So on the right were politicians or figures from history like Genghis Khan. Now, there's that lovely saying, to the right of Genghis Khan, to describe people's political beliefs. But people there believe in the free market. They believe in property rights.
Oh, hold on, you're not suggesting Genghis Khan believed in property rights?
No, he was much more likely to steal your property, but he's written up by history as a politician of the right.
Right, what about on the left?
On the left-hand side, we think of socialists, communists. This fellow, Lenin, is firmly entrenched in people's minds as somebody of the left, but really it's very artificial. Many of the policies sort of mix, and the emphasis that they had really are mixed right across this political spectrum, so it doesn't provide a lot of utility, really, I don't believe.
Yeah, when you look at it like that, you can see that whether they were into distributing wealth or whether they were into keeping it in a stratified society, they were all dictators, basically.
That's right. So very different to the political spectrum that we have today, but we've got that hangover of left and right.
And what about the centre?
The centre, most recently, the party that touted itself as being a centrist party was United Future, which no longer exists on our political spectrum. Today, actually, most of the parties congregate around that centre space. So that's, not surprisingly, sitting somewhere in between what people think of as the left and the right.
Okay, well, let's try and put our current New Zealand political parties on that typical left, centre, right spectrum, shall we? And we'll start off with...
Yes, with the National Party and the Labour Party. So the National Party really is a centre-right party, and the Labour Party a centre-left party. And you can't see it so clearly in this slide, but really there's a lot of overlap between the two. And if you look at their voting record in Parliament, about 75% of the time, these two parties vote the same way, something that often surprises people when you tell them that.
Yeah. And what about ACT and the Greens?
Well, ACT is firmly entrenched in people's minds as a party of the right, and the Greens as a party of the left. And really that's that socialist versus free market approach that sort of puts them at polar opposites.
Okay, and New Zealand First.
So New Zealand First, it's sometimes a bit hard to determine where it sits on this side of the spectrum. It went with Labour last time, so some people think it's left, but really they sort of are at the more conservative end of the spectrum, so we've set them here slightly to the right of centre.
Okay, A better way that we believe can be used to describe the political spectrum, what we call the actual political spectrum, has two measures or two axes, and they are up on the screen now, Heather.
Yeah, so on the x-axis over on the left, you've got state-run or a socialist view, and then over on the right, free market or capitalist. And these terms obviously relate much more to the economy than anything else. So the parties of the left believe that the state runs things better. They believe in redistributing wealth. Over on the free market end, it's much more about people having the opportunities to determine their own wealth.
But that doesn't really cover off matters in society like who should be able to be married to who and that sort of thing.
No, that's right. So those societal views are represented by the y-axis at the top. We've got liberal views, and by liberal we've defined that as challenging the status quo, embracing change. And down at the opposite end, down the bottom of this graph, is the traditional or the conservative view of the way things should be.
Right, shall we have a go at putting the New Zealand political parties on here then?
Yeah, we should. And people might like to have a little go themselves, so if you want to do that first before you see what we think, you might like to just stop the video here and have a think about that. Okay, so first up we've got the National Party, who we've talked before about traversing that centre line, but they really are a party that believes in the free market and their policies reflect that, but there's a conservative about them, which is why we've put them below the centre on that horizontal line.
Okay, and Labour, I guess this is really representing an overlap, isn't it, as you're talking about with the 75%. They're more naturally oriented towards a socialist take on the economy of, redistributing wealth and having state government departments running things rather than free market enterprises, but also more likely to lean towards more liberal views of societal legislation like prostitution reform and the like, even though we know a lot of those things are often conscience votes. The party naturally leans that way, whereas the National Caucus largely leans towards the conservative way. Not 100%, but by and large.
Yeah, they're big parties. They're trying to appeal to 50% of the electorate, and so they do have to be relatively broad churches, particularly in those societal views.
Yeah, moving right along.
So we've got ACT up in the top right still, and that's because they firmly believe in the free market, and they also are very liberal in their societal views.
Yeah, so where people like to describe ACT as hard right, they're actually upper right, aren't they?
That's right. Hard right is a misnomer.
It's an irrelevant term, really, isn't it? And the Greens?
And the Greens, surprisingly, sit on the same horizontal axis as the ACT Party in that they also believe in challenging the status quo, but they economically are at the socialist end of the spectrum.
Right, and New Zealand first.
Yes, again, people tend to put New Zealand first all over the show, but they are very conservative in their views, and I think that's something that everybody agrees on. This time they've gone with Labour, and so they've more embraced the state-run end of the spectrum than they have the free market one, so we've put them down the bottom and slightly to the left.
Yeah, when you're looking at things like the super gold card discounts and free GP visits and things like that, they tend to be at the socialist end of the...
That's right, that's about redistributing wealth.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's probably enough for today. If you'd like to learn more about effective political lobbying in New Zealand, why not come along to one of our Lobby Talk experiential learning programs. There's also a full series of podcasts on the 2020 election on our website at torquepoint.co.nz, or you can also find us on any of the social media shown on this slide. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
We'll talk to you soon.